Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Hi, my name is Joshua Parkerson. Welcome to the Bible for Busy People. This week, I'll be filling in for my mom, Erica, and begin a series called Victory in Christ. In this episode, we will discuss about the man who went from slave to second, Joseph. Have you ever felt like you were thrown in the skillet of life? Years ago, I used to have a disease called ulcerative colitis. It is a debilitating monster that hijacks your immune system into thinking your large intestine is an enemy. I lost a ton of weight and was on a restrictive diet. I felt like I was in the skillet, like Joseph in the pit. At the time, Joseph was living in the land of Canaan and was Jacob's favorite son. Joseph's brothers did not like this. Jacob later on gives Joseph a coat of many colors. The brothers become enraged and they plotted against Joseph. The brothers then throw Joseph in a pit, resulting in Joseph being sold into Egyptian slavery. For it says in Genesis 37:23-24, "So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it." Joseph's brothers were so angry, they threw Joseph in a pit and could care less if he was sold into the hands of the Egyptians. After Joseph became a slave, he was thrown in prison for things he did not do. However, Pharaoh had a dream. In Genesis 41:14-16, Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once. He was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it." "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied, "but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease." Even though Joseph was in prison, God was able to give Joseph the wisdom to help Pharaoh with his dream. After Joseph tells Pharaoh the interpretation of his dream, Pharaoh concludes that there is no one so discerning and wise as Joseph. Pharaoh then decides to give Joseph second in command of Egypt for interpreting his dream. For Genesis 41:41-42 says, "Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt.' Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck." It is interesting that Joseph had his coat of many colors taken away. Even his clothes were restored. His coat of many colors was taken, but he was given robes of fine linen. After Joseph was put in as second in command of Egypt, he reconciled with his brothers. Wow. After all that Joseph went through with his brothers and the Egyptians, God used those moments for good. For Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them." Even when Joseph suffered, he still found victory in Christ in his lowest moments because God used those moments for good. Have you ever experienced a time when God took what the enemy meant for evil and turned it for good? After overcoming ulcerative colitis, I believe God used my lowest moments for good. I still to this day do not know why God allowed me to suffer, but I do know that God has a perfect plan, not only for my life, but for yours too. Like Joseph, we all have our moments in the skillet, but God can use those moments in the skillet for good. Next time on the Bible for Busy People, we're going to dive into deliverance from Egypt and see how Moses led the Israelites across the Red Sea by trusting God despite uncertain times. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time on the Bible for Busy People.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or you're ready to go a little deeper in your faith, we've posted some resources for you in our show notes. We'd love for you to share this podcast with a friend and leave us a review. It helps us reach even more people with the hope of Jesus. This podcast is part of Purposely, a podcast network designed with practical podcasts to help you find and live in God's purpose for your life. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at onpurposely.com.